if more people were living in their purpose and passion, that I can't help but the immediate word that came to my brain was Nirvana. Because at that point, when everyone's living their passion, I mean, love and happiness and joy and even smiles have been quantified scientifically as a vibrational elevation of the human spirit. And so, if everyone was able to live with choice in their life that was self-created, with a sense of their uniqueness and their purpose, I mean, that's got to be either nirvana, heaven. That's got to be, if this is what we're enduring now on the planet, then that could be, I think, the most reasonable iteration of heaven. Because then we would all be in the higher angels of our nature. We would be capable of understanding our value, and therein even more effective node of an effective transmitter of clarity, because we're like an atom. I mean, each molecule is a part of the cellular collective and whole. And so if we're all firing on all cylinders, if you will, wow, that's got to be the best iteration of heaven or nirvana. And so I think that's why it first came to mind. But so yeah, I think it would be nirvana.
Hi, my name is Zenka Caro. I'm founder of LightNet, and my passion and purpose is to make the impossible possible. I am here today with Nathan Quinn, who is a cultural visionary and cultural catalyst that is really working to combine a lot of artistic modalities into social impact and incredible experience design. He started his career out as a Ford and elite model, working for brands such as Adidas, Armani, Versace, and GQ Live. He later went out on to found his own company, which is By Design International, creating very impactful events around the world. He also lends his creative genius to the Arizona Community Foundation, the Gill Foundation, the Williams Institute, the Equal Justice Initiative, and he's also the director and producer of the Sustainable Fashion Lab Sedona on November 15th. Links are below. He's got such an incredible personality, and his multi-talented brain and heart bring a lot of amazing impact to the world. Check it out.
I would say to be uplift and assist to others, and to also try to be an example of possible. I was the youngest of four kids, and so my mother was a joyous woman, and my father was probably a little more serious, but I was the baby, so I was always spending a little time I found by myself, because I thought that there was a more regular way for me to be happy or be in a contented state when I was alone. For not because there was any dramas or whatever going on, but that during those periods when I would be alone, I would realize I would listen to music, or like when I would come back out and be a part of the family, then mom, it would be great because either one of my siblings might have influenced her a certain kind of way. And so I would always be the kid that wanted to make mom laugh and wanted to make dad be a little less serious. My dad was a military man. And so probably, we went very early on after I was born to live in Germany, in Europe. And so, about the time that I was 4 or 5 years old, I would notice that my dad would come home from work and my mom would be, there handling the kids, and he would be a little stressed, but he loved music and he loved dance, and my mother the same. And so it would seemingly be my mission to come up with a funny thing to say to him, or a funny thing to say to my mom. So I realized, and they were a social couple. So they would have friends over, other officers from the base. My father was a military man, like I said. So they would have their friends over, and then they would be there, deconstructing, having fun social times. So I could get to stay up later past my bedtime if I could, do something really adult. Like they would ask me a question that a kid that maybe was 4 or 5 years old shouldn't have been probably reasonably able to answer, and certainly either in German or in English at an adult level, I guess, is the context. And so I would, really try to come up with those little jewels and tidbits. So I think that was one of the first moments that I realized that if I could do that, if I could be, and that I finding little joy in myself, that I wanted to convey to my mother and my father, so that they could have the same kind of joy. So that I thought was an early kind of identifier of what I felt like, at least in my family structure, my purpose was. Like I said, we were a family unit, and we were always the Jenkins, because my father and mother were traveling around. We were in Germany, and then we were in Austria, and then we made our way west across the states to finally end up here in Arizona. So along the way, when we left Europe and came to the States, I was 7 years of age. So I then had a new context that I was landing in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and I was wearing lederhosen and clogs and, trying to speak in German. Ja, das ist sehr gut mit mir. Wie geht's, mein Freund? And so all of the kids that I used to associate with, that would look like Heidi or Inga or Udo or some of my German friends, that I would approach them on the playground and I would say, hey, how are you? And there would be this context around the way that I spoke. And then, kids of color were the same thing, like, what are you saying to me? And all of that, like, oh, you're a nerd. And that wouldn't say I'm a nerd, but that's the new language for it. They would say you're weird. I remember that being one of the things. And so I was kind of like, I went home crying, and I remembered that. And my mom was just like, well, I don't care what, did they call you by your name? Did they, so then why are you? And I said, no, but they were shouting things at me. And she said, well, then if they didn't call you by your name, then why are you giving those people that, those kids that power? I mean, so that was when I kind of realized that I am really different, and that, not for just my skin color but because of my disposition. I wanted to talk to kids. I wanted to make them laugh, and I wanted to be the kind of court jester, if you will, which is something that I kind of came to early on due to my, family structure. And so I was trying to put that into effect there, and it just didn't kind of resonate as well as I thought. So, and so after that, my mom sent me, she said, you're going to turn around and you're going to go back to school, and because you're going to school to get an education. You're not going to school to win a popularity contest. And so I said, but Mom, she said, Quinton, I don't know why you keep talking to me. You need to go back. The world is going to be full of people who don't understand you and who don't see you. So, go there and, get your education. And so that was when I really had a deep level context on, okay, I'm not the guy that I was to this point, but I am this, so that's when I kind of had a personal ownership in this kind of court jester kind of disposition that I thought was a part of my purpose, to help people smile, help people get out of their ruts, if you will, if not in comically, just energetically. Well, so when we got out here to Arizona, I was when I was in grade school and through my high school years and into college, and so the same kind of context played themselves out when I got here to a new city, new state, and all of that, and a different psychology here in the Southwest than there was in the South, and than there was in Europe. So I kind of had to rely on these self understandings and these self gifts, I guess, or these self descriptors that I felt were who I really am, to kind of navigate the murky waters of getting into school and finding my tribe. And so they helped me in that way then, because I realized then that I was an arts baby. I was in ROTC in grade school because I wanted to be like my dad, I thought early on. But then after I learned how to deconstruct and reconstruct a semi-automatic weapon and then do these drill, I was good on the drill team and all of these things, I was a drill captain and all of that. And so, it was great for that. But then I was feeling I still don't like the uniform, and I still don't like identifying, with some other body that, while it's cool for the show, but I wanted to be me 24/7. So I had to kind of go back into who I understood I am as a person. So I found out that I'm an arts baby. I found out that I am smart. And so I became a student senator and kind of got into different bodies there. I became a student assistant to the topics that I was good at, which was English and history and civic studies. And so, they helped me really then to navigate the murky waters, because by that point I had a very clear image of who I am as a person, that I'm Quentin, and that everything else kind of, comes into play outside of that understanding and there, or through that connection of who I understand that I really am. So I was looking for my tribe. So I was in choir, and I became a concert choir member very early on, and that took me into other things in life because we were competing nationally and then internationally ultimately. So that helped me to, understand that, my skill sets and my gifts, because then if I could make the choir director laugh or something, then maybe I would get that solo that I'd been trying to do, or maybe he would look at me more favorably outside of the scope of maybe what my voice quality was, or that. So, and then in college, by that time I was, I was very clear, self-clear about who I was, who I am, and what I intended to do. I knew that I was a creative. I knew that I wanted to make people laugh. I knew that I wanted to try to elevate the fortunes of other people. If I could do that, as I was kind of, coming through the ranks, I, created my own little dance troupe called the Cassettes early on. So we were finding ways to go into clubs and monetize, because at that time disco was big. So a lot of the nightclubs were having disco dance competitions and that. So I found a way to earn money in a legal way, and to get me out of my house and to get me into, putting money into the bank, for my adult success, and also to be able to elevate the fortunes of other people, because then I would pick some of my favorite people, and because I was the choreographer and the visionary, and then the guy that went out and grabbed the clients, then my skill sets and my understandings of what my real purpose and who I am as an individual, my identity, help me navigate those murky waters in life in general, and therefore to be able to create great associations with entrepreneurs, business owners, and so very quickly then I formed my own first business, Scandali Productions, because I always thought, that I was scandalous, because I was bringing an aesthetic, that wasn't really prevalent in the market, and then in ways that was very creative, that resonated with people in terms of what their intention were to bring in more customers. So, that's, I think, how I would answer that. Well, as you know, early on, I figured that I'm an entrepreneur because I did work in corporate for a couple of years, on a part-time basis. And then I got a position at a department store and felt like I thought that I would be a regional or an international buyer for the men's department there. And then when I kept getting into a wall with being promoted at that business, then I said, well, I'm just not getting where I want to be. And so I went out into the market and created my own business and started to go to entrepreneurs as a B2B kind of construct, which got me much further, much quicker. And so also along the way, because I do know who I am as a person, my orientation as a bisexual male, and my father was Welsh and my mother was African American, so I'm a bicultured individual. And so I was always navigating these other categories, if you will, in general society. And so I was trying to find a better resonance with my tribe. So I started to see people of color because I was a person of color, and tried to be effective in those pathways in business and in interpersonal relationships. I started to see the LGBTQ community in ways that were kind of a part of my tribe because they were othered in their existence. And so I was starting to lean in and start to work with those underserved or underdeveloped communities early on. So that's how I got involved. When the AIDS crisis happened in Africa, I felt as an American, African American, that it really was impacting me, especially as African American male. It was really impacting me adversely, and I couldn't figure out why. And I figured that I could be helpful to African men. And so I went into volunteering for an AIDS organization, Phoenix Body Positive, back in the day. And so I started to get involved in communities so that I could say, you really have people who see you and who want to be a part of your existence and a part of your thriving in meaningful ways. So I tried to, figure out how I could use my skill sets to be able to uplift and help those people. So that's another context of how, these purposeful, my purpose, the revelations around my purpose have been helpful, I think, in life. And then later, as I kind of perfected my brand, if you will, or my being, I like to say that, and I've continued to try to evolve my being in communities because I've lived internationally in Italy and in Germany and in Spain and in England and in the Netherlands. And so when I'm in those cultures, I'm seeing parallels in cultures so that it's made me understand that this is a part of the human condition, that irrespective of your cultural origin, you have a human responsibility to continue to try to evolve your humanity and your personhood. And so later in life, then I was able to use these universal tenets of empathy, inventiveness, resourcefulness, to juxtapose them on whatever new scenarios that I encountered where I wanted to lean in and be an assist to helping those communities evolve. Why do people not more commonly or more often do a deeper level dive on what exactly their unique purpose is for being on the planet? Well, I just think that, humans are communal beings. And so unless you have a context, some people say it's a later life thing where they get to a wall and they have a midlife crisis, and so their brain is cracked open, for example. Luckily for me, and I say this all the time, both of my parents are off the planet now, but when they were alive, I would hug on them and I would kiss on them and I would lavish them and I would constantly be in communication with them over my reverence for them as real guides and real mentors, that they poured a lot of love into me as a being. And so I think that, not saying that other people in the world don't have that same well source, but I think that as a result of the uniqueness of each life, the circumstances around which they are coming into the world and they're evolving are different. So some people have an exposure to these kinds of evolutionary mindsets, right? And some people don't. And so as a result, the common thing I think to do is to silo or to associate with or to attach your star to someone who you feel represents the values and the qualities that you would like to develop for yourself. And so sometimes that person or that entity isn't spiritually intelligent, emotionally intelligent, physically intelligent. They might not be as wholly evolved. And so and we know that society at large has categories. Guys are this. I mean, there are books written, for example, just around the sexes. Men are from Venus and women are from Mars, right? So there are already these siloing things going on in general society. So to fit into that, you have to come through in some category. Dudes are supposed to be like this. Chicks are supposed to be like that. And so if those are the categories by which you have to define who you are as a person and whether you're really a successful person, in capitalist societies, you're a really great person if you can make millions and millions of dollars, without any focus on the idea that along with the same work that you've done to create those, monetary gains, you have to do the same work to create interpersonal gains, human gains, interpersonal gains, right? So I've said to a number of clients, you can have all the money you have in the world or you want in the world and still be a bereft and, I can probably just say you can still be an asshole. I mean, you just end up being a non-balanced person. I'm trying to use kinder terminologies, but so I think that that's what's contributed to how societies, the sensitive male has just now started to evolve in societies. The more evolved male, like with people like the Deepak Chopra, for example, or the philosophy coaches, Anthony Robbins, or some of the other people who are saying, success as a human, and especially as a male. I mean, I think women sometimes are much better about finding an easier way to evolve, or because they've had to deal with these categoristic suppressions in society for a long time. But that women are life givers, and women talk to other women differently than men talk to other men. Dudes, in my experience. And so we have an opportunity to get to life givers, as women to women, whereas dudes are kind of like, they have a different psychology, I think, and especially around how societies put males into some kind of category, that if you're not able to open a can of whoop ass on a bunch of people, and you're not, they're and we kind of come to this thing about toxic masculinity. No one's ever talked about just real manhood that's evolved to a real balanced individual. It's always through the lens of how strong they are, or men are, or how much money they make, or other categories that I will save. And so I think that that's what's really contributed to this siloing of societies, both gender-wise, both class-wise, and both culturally, to include culture, because then we don't have, like we in tribes back in indigenous cultures, you had a chieftain, then you had a shaman, then you had you had these different categories represented. You had right in your tribe an immediate, wisdom keeper. Two-spirited people used to be looked at as really a more highly elevated construct as a human. And so we've discarded that knowledge. Back in the day, though, they would send kids to the two-spirited person so that they could, find a better balance between the masculine and feminine, which the two-spirited person would have right in their construct, So I think that that's why, societies have been, really struggling to kind of evolve because they've not put together these tenets that we understand are more universally effective than these agendas that, you have to have this culture as a German, you have to have this culture as an Italian, or as opposed to you have to figure out as a human what exactly your identity is. In even above and beyond those cultural descriptors. Well, I wouldn't say that it would be a struggle in trying to answer your question. I've always kind of early on looked at them instead of as struggles as challenges. And the difference to me in that wording is a struggle is something that it seems like is endlessly unachievable or not one isn't easily able to overcome because therein it's a struggle, and then you take to that the dissenting connotation of the word struggle, like you're already underwater, and so you're struggling. Whereas to me, challenging means that it's actually asking you to step up, even in a challenging scenario, right? Even in an adversely configured scenario, it's asking you to challenge yourself, both the lesser and the better angels of your nature, to kind of find a pathway forward. And then the final part about that is I also thought about it as these struggles or challenges were in somehow a spiritual test for your evolution, to see if when this energy of negativity or challenge is toggling you some kind of way to make you feel inadequate or make you feel less than, then I've always had the line that, okay, this is a test of who I am and where I am as an individual, where I'm, how I'm balanced as an individual, so that my self-language looks at it as a test. So then now I go into test success mode, which is to go back in and do study around why this particular topic is challenging me in this certain way, and what do I possess inside of me that can help me overcome that, or what do I need to learn to do in myself to be able to overcome that? What behaviors or languages, self-languages, do I need to modify to overcome that, so that it's not quite as dire as a struggle, that it's now a more scientific or mental exercise that as a test. What I would say to most help people to try to focus on or identify their purpose is what I've found for me to be the most successful, which is to come to a baseline where I've taken socialization out of the equation. I've just gotten quiet with myself. I put myself in very quiet scenarios, usually in nature, where I find a lot of organic inspiration out of seeing the birds and how they interact and how they feed, how they talk to one another. So, because the nature has worked for thousands and thousands or millions of years in certain harmony, in certain balance. So I would say if you have an onus to yourself to find out for yourself, to yourself, who exactly you feel like you are. So spending a lot of time with yourself, without any distraction, with an idea to be able to not just meditate, but to, maybe read and then have a context by which to gauge where you are in terms of what topics that this author is asserting, and say, well, okay, where am I in that story? Like, I wouldn't have been the bad guy in the book. I more identify with the good guy in the book, or whatever the context is, so that you have context, right? But that it's an interpersonal exercise. For me, it's been an interpersonal exercise that spending time by myself, being in quiet, being in nature, and finding out what that now gives me an opportunity to, because I've got freed mind space, I've got freed energy, and I've got no outside detractors. So now, after doing that for a series of times as a regular practice, then I've been able to be inspired, because then now I'll see, hey, I'm feeling this way more often than not, right? So then I'm feeling like I would like to create this more often than not. And so then when you get those reiterative thoughts, then you can kind of take more ownership of that to say, okay, that's why that person who, was behaving in this way was a sage to my sensibilities, because I'm really not that person, I'm this person. So out of that, you're identifying more of who you are to yourself, not for your pops, not for your spouse, not for your workmates, not for whoever, but for you to you. And then it gives you an opportunity to be inspired. And I think it engenders dreams, where at least it has for me, because then when I've been mindful and heavy on, reading something, then I'll go to sleep and then I'll dream about, something that I've read, or a movie or something that I was watching for inspiration or whatever. And then I'll go, oh no, and it'll either engender nightmares, or it'll cause me to be like, oh my goodness, I saw myself as already that superhero, or that really successful person, or that wonderful counselor. And so then that there's another, so even in your subconscious, so that when these positive self nurturing thoughts become more regular in your subconscious, then now it serves to help you build a clearer identity around your purpose when you're in the conscious, and when you're awake and having intersectionality with the world. And so that's, for me, something that, because a lot of people, to your point, are defining themselves around what society has in store for them, or what their parents' hopes were for them. And so I'm just like, well, okay, yeah, I heard what you said, but because I've spent enough time with myself and tested these theories out as I've continued to live, I've tested these theories out as to whether I was born to be an athlete, or I was born to be this or that. So I've tested these theories out, and I found the place where I get most positive feedback and most positive response in business, in interpersonal relationships, in the pursuit of love, and the pursuit of happiness has been, how I now identify myself more regularly, because then that says that what started with me as a action or a motion to the world, or an interaction, came back favorably, that was unique to me. So then out of those things, I think you can start to glean, like, okay, I'm really not only good at this, but it does something to bring me inner joy and inner peace. That's something that I intend for the world, and my intentions and in my interactions has come back to me full fold. So then that to me is tied with what I think is purpose as well. What effect have I had on other people by living in my purpose? That's an interesting question, because it would only be through my lens of evaluation that I would give this answer. But from the people who I've been associated with for the longest time, either clients that I've had for 2 or 3 decades, or from family members, or from people in my inner circle, some of them tell me I'm, a little, posh. Some of them tell me I'm a little nerdy. Some of them say that I'm really creative. Some say that I'm very, very smart. And so I would just take those feedbacks as, what would I say, my effect on other people has been from that feedback. But kind of conversely, answering the question, what my hope is that the interactions that I've had with people have been uplifting in some, not in every, I'm sure at certain points I've been a pain in the behind. And sometimes I've been perceived as confrontational, or very, limited in my thinking, is, some of the feedback. But I would hope that the interactions and the things that I've manufactured in my life have resulted in what my intention is for those interactions, whether in business or in interpersonal relationships or in friendships, etc., to be a value add to their lives, and to be a spot of humor and a spot of hopeful inspiration around possible, especially to other people that know that I'm bisexual, that I'm bicultured, and have associated with me through those lens of connection. So then, I know that in my fashion career, or fashion chapter or era of my life, many African American males in Arizona have come up to me and said, "Q, aren't you doing any modeling anymore? We don't see you in ads or anything like that." And have told me that it was so great to see you, because I know you. I've been able to walk up to you and talk to you, so you're not some stratified figure or something like that, intangible. And you were an inspiration to me, because I've always wanted to do some of the things that I've seen you do, acting and in commercials, or in fashion, or at MC at an event, or in your community activism. They've come to me on a personal level and said, you have been an example for me in the past, and continue to be an example of possible. If more people were living in their purpose and passion, that I can't help, the immediate word that came to my brain was Nirvana. Because at that point, when everyone's living their passion, love and happiness and joy and even smiles have been quantified scientifically as a vibrational elevation of the human spirit. And so, if everyone was able to live with choice in their life that was self-created, with a sense of their uniqueness and their purpose, I mean, that's got to be either Nirvana, heaven. That's got to be, if this is what we're enduring now on the planet, then that could be, I think, the most reasonable iteration of heaven. Because then we would all be in the higher angels of our nature. We would be capable of understanding our value, and therein even more effective node of an effective transmitter of clarity, because we're like an atom. I mean, each molecule is a part of the circular collective and whole. And so if we're all firing on all cylinders, if you will, wow, that's got to be the best iteration of heaven or nirvana. And so I think that's why it first came to mind. But so yeah, I think it would be nirvana. I would say that, and continuing to try to evolve as a human being, I think that the things that have been the most resonant, well, I don't even think I know the things that have been the most enriching and fortifying for me to continue and to be the best person that I can be has been the joy that I can see comes back to me from the people that are around me. And so if by doing the harder work to come at who you are as a person is more at the forefront of your being, then I can say for me the immediate reward is not about money, it's not about power, it's not about it's the continuing connection of love, happiness, joy, and humor that I get back. And I'm trying to create a more through line with that so that I can live in that higher flow state more regularly. So that's the constant self work. So that's the only other thing that I would add to the conversation. We know that the universe is infinite, but we also know that it's molecular as well. So we have relevance, but the fact that we're still living means that there's something that we're still supposed to be able to affect. And if you focus on the positive, that is at the forefront, of your interactions, which is sometimes really hard to do because the dogma in the world is one thing. So external influences and in the nature. I mean, you see all of these different contexts, and so that's what the constant human, for me, the constant life challenge or test has been to make sure that, because our life is finite, it's not infinite. As human beings, we're going to be breathing for only so long. So I just want to make sure that I've done all I could to be the best person that I could be before I get some diagnosis or some scenario that hits me, some test that hits me in the face that says, buddy, you might not be able to overcome this. So now I can actually say that I gave it a good go. I did my best. I did my best.